Yo, 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 what is up, my fellow roundtable warriors? How goes it? What is up? Welcome to the video. I'm going to share with you in this mini course what I call a legendary tool that will guarantee success. And this is not like an exaggeration. This tool, if you use it correctly, will guarantee your personal success in whatever goals or endeavors you have. Trust me on this. Once I describe it, once I kind of get more into exactly what this tool is, it's going to be the most simplistic, easy to use tool ever. But 99% of people do not use it. So I'm going to get right into it, and we're going to start by getting into my introduction. So one of the reasons why I'm sort of making this mini course, and as you know, my goal for the roundtable is to make a bunch of different mini courses that I think will help enhance your life. I want to kind of focus on every area: health, wealth, and relationships. This one doesn't really pertain to any of those three pillars, as I call them, but rather it pertains to sort of all three simultaneously. And the reason why it does is because once you sort of learn how to use this skill, or I should say this tool, every aspect of your life can be improved dramatically. I'm not kidding when I say this. I'm not exaggerating. Every single area of your life will be improved if you can implement this tool correctly. Now, the key thing to consider is this: how you plan your day and how you make decisions determines the quality of your life. Whenever you see people that are successful, the thing they all have in common is that they use their 24 hours far more effectively than you do. Does that make sense? When you see someone like Jeff Bezos from Amazon, or someone like Elon Musk, or if you like celebrities, someone like Dwayne Johnson or Conor McGregor or whoever, think of whatever celebrity or athlete or famous entrepreneur you like, and I guarantee they use their time more effectively than you do. And that is what leads them to their success, their effective use of time. And the thing to remember is that everyone has the exact same 24 hours in a day. How you manage and budget those 24 hours will determine the level of success you have over the course of your life. Now, this tool that I'm going to share with you will help you use those 24 hours a lot more effectively. So I kind of explained this already, but why does this matter? You only have 24 hours every single day. You have a finite amount of time to get a lot done. And life is competitive. This is the reality of it. Life is competitive. If you're not using your 24 hours effectively, you can guarantee that someone else is using their 24 hours effectively. And things in life that you want, other people might take from you by using their time more effectively. So in order for you to be competitive, you need to sort of learn the skills and the traits to use your time more wisely. Now, what separates you from any high performer is, like I said, time management. In pursuit of achieving eudaimonia, which I just kind of referenced earlier, health, wealth, and relationships, you're going to have good time management skills. There's no way around it. That is the core of what is required to be successful in your own life. So, like I said again, this tool that I'm going to share with you will help you achieve that goal, but it's only going to help you achieve that goal if you use this tool effectively and implement it effectively. Real quick, something that I do want to kind of point out to you as I adjust my microphone so it's closer to my face. My belief is that the day is won the night before. Some people sort of try to plan their day out the day of, or they don't plan their day out at all and they try to wing it. I think that is one of the worst mistakes you could ever make. Not scheduling your day, not planning out your day, to me is by far the worst thing you can do, because effectively you're just a feather in the wind. You're kind of just letting life happen to you, rather than happen to life. So I think that's a huge mistake that a lot of people make. Now, I think the second thing, and it's a better option, but still not the most optimal option, is sort of trying to plan your day the day of. And the reason why I don't like doing this is because if you're planning your day the day of, you're already at a time deficit, so to speak. You're taking like an hour or half an hour or even 15 minutes of your day to strategize and to plan effectively. And I think if you do that in the beginning of the day, you're sort of killing your own momentum. You're not really getting off to a good start in the day. And again, that kind of leads you to not really effectively use your time correctly, not get as much stuff done, that makes it a bit more difficult to even get anything done, because sometimes when people wake up, they take a minute to get ready, get prepared, then they have to ease into their work. And for some people, it's not really an easy thing to get into their work that they have to do. They do it kind of begrudgingly, and it's just an uphill battle. Planning your day the day before takes this away. It lets you wake up knowing exactly what you need to do. Now, personally, I like to think of every single hour of my day as its own form of currency. People always kind of think about money just in terms of what's in their bank account. They see, say, $1,000 in their bank account, and if the amount drops too much, people panic or people get worried. And I think that's fine to do with money, but it fascinates me how people don't do this with their own time. They'll wake up at, say, 8 a.m., and by 5 p.m., they're not panicking about a day that's not productive. They haven't really sat there and thought about what should have been done that day to really move the needle forward in their own lives, to really get their goals accomplished, to really push them further ahead and get them from point A to point B. And point B is where they want to be. Does that make sense? So I think in order for you to sort of overcome all of these, I'm going to say areas where people kind of fall or mess up or they're not as effective, you need to have a planner. A planner is the perfect tool for this. A planner is that legendary tool that I kind of alluded to earlier that will 10x your progress in life. Now, how exactly do you use a planner effectively? The first thing you need to do is you need to have a definitive goal. In order for you to achieve anything in life, my fundamental belief is that you need to have a goal first and foremost. You can't simply just be a ghost in life, hoping that things happen to you that are to your benefit. Now, I'm not saying that that can't happen. Certainly, things can happen at random that are favorable. Certainly, you can win, the lottery. Theoretically, you can win the lottery, and I guess in another sense as well, where maybe just blessings fall upon you. Fair enough. Those things can happen, but I think in order for you to truly get what you want, you have to know what you want. So you have to have a goal to strive for. Now, when using the planner, plan by the hour. This, to me, I think is the most effective thing you can do. First of all, schedule the exact time you're going to wake up and schedule the exact time you plan on getting to bed. And then everything in between, you should be planning by the hour. And really what you're doing is you're taking the 1 to 3 things that'll really get you closer to your goal. The 1 to 3 things that are truly going to not so much push you an inch, but push you a mile to your objective. Does that make sense? Prioritize the main thing and plan your day as if it's the only thing you'll get done. Now, I've had talks with people who, some clients of mine, and one of the main things they always say is, how exactly do I know what to schedule? How exactly do I know what to plan? And I might have a slide on this in the future of this video, but I just kind of want to bring this up right now. I tell people, assume that, let's say I always use fitness because fitness is always the first thing that pops into my head. Let's say your goal is to gain 10 pounds of muscle in 5 months. Let's just make up a goal. Say that's your goal. If your goal is to gain muscle, and say we sit there and reverse engineer all the things you need to do to gain muscle, you're eventually going to find out that one of the key things you need to do to gain weight is to have enough calories consumed every single day. You need to be in a calorie surplus in order to gain weight. And this isn't going to be a fitness video, but I'm just using this as an example to kind of illustrate the point of how to prioritize what activities you do. We've come to the conclusion that being in a calorie surplus is one of the most effective things you can do to gain weight. But you probably don't just want to gain weight and get fat. You want to gain weight while also building muscle. So really, overall, what's going to come down to is you need to be in a caloric surplus, and you're going to need to also be lifting weights consistently. The main thing you'd be doing in this situation, and of course, if you're working with me, I'd help you kind of walk through this. The main thing you'd be doing is prioritizing lifting weights. And the reason why you prioritize lifting weights is because being in a caloric surplus will only make you fat if the weights don't come alongside it. The weights are the most important thing for you to achieve your goal of gaining 10 pounds in the next X amount of months. And I know you might be sitting there thinking, well, if I eat weight, technically I'm getting 10 pounds. Sure, fair enough. But in this situation, we're talking more about gaining 10 pounds with the sort of underlying goal of gaining muscle. And in order for you to gain muscle, you have to be lifting weights. So the lifting weights part is the most essential thing. If nothing else fails, then if you do nothing else in a single day, then the one thing you should have done is worked out. Does that make sense? And you can sort of extrapolate this and apply this to any goal you have. But you need to reverse engineer exactly what the goal is, figure out the steps to get to the goal, identify the most important things to get to the goal, and then make the top 1 to 3 things the only 3 things you focus on until they're achieved. And then out of those 3 things, even assume that you only get one of those things done. Assume only one thing will get done. Now, of course, going back to the fitness goal, let's say, doing a meal plan is one of the other main things. Lifting weights, as we identified, is one of the things. And let's say, I don't know, I'm making something up off the top of my head. Stretching might be the third thing to help you achieve your goal. Or let's take out stretching and let's say actually tracking your calories. Let's say tracking your calories. That's the third main thing. While you probably could do all 3 of those things in a day, once again, the key thing is actually exercising, because our underlying goal is not just to gain 10 pounds, it's to gain 10 pounds with the intent to gain muscle. So the gaining muscle part is essential. And if you sort of track calories, that's fine. But if you're not exercising, it doesn't matter. If you're eating in a caloric surplus, that's fine. But it doesn't matter if you're not exercising. So exercise is the thing that matters the most. Therefore, it's the only thing that you should be it's the main thing that you should be thinking about if everything else fails. If you don't track your calories, that's fine. As long as you exercised, you could still gain weight without technically tracking every single calorie. If you didn't eat in a caloric surplus today, that's fine. You don't always need to eat in a caloric surplus every single day consistently. You just need to be eating in a caloric surplus enough. But the main thing is the exercise, because without the exercise, the weight that you gain will just be fat. It won't be muscle. So I don't want to sort of stay on that too much, the whole fitness thing, but I hope this illustrates the point that I'm trying to make of how to use your planner effectively. Have a definitive goal, reverse engineer the 3 things that really will lead you to the goal, and then assume that you can only get one of those 3 things done every single day. And that should be the main thing you focus on every single day. If you get it done, cool, that's perfect. Do the other 2 things afterwards. If you can't do those other 2 things, that's totally fine. You at least did the one thing that mattered the most. So at least you're making progress toward your goal. And then the final thing too, know your deadlines. Sometimes when people set goals, they have a bunch of goals, but they don't add deadlines to them. And I don't really understand why anyone would do this. Even if you have a goal that doesn't need a deadline, I would still give it a deadline. And the reason why too is it creates urgency, and you need a little bit of urgency to generate motivation. The second reason why is if you don't have a deadline, you can't really prioritize your goals effectively. If you have 4 different goals and you have no deadlines on each of them, it's too difficult to really sit there and figure out which one you should go for first. You're going to try to go for all 4 goals simultaneously, and that's not going to work out, because your brain cannot really optimize for 4 different big things at once. You can really only optimize for one thing at a time. So knowing your deadlines helps you really orient yourself and figure out what you should be optimizing for. Hopefully that makes sense. So here's sort of just an example of how to use your planner effectively. So in this example, I have John Smith. John Smith has 3 projects to get done. Project 1 is due in 3 weeks. Project 2 is due in 4 days. Project 3 is due in 1 month. But John is not like a workaholic. John likes to have some free time. He wants to relax. He wants to work out. He wants to watch his favorite TV show. He loves watching Californication, or he loves watching Mad Men, or whatever. He likes watching reality TV. It doesn't matter. He likes to watch TV. He struggles to organize his day because he also works 8 hours at his job. So he's got these projects, and these projects he can't necessarily do while he's working his standard 9-to-5 job. He works a standard job, but he also has things to do on the side afterwards. Maybe he's starting his own startup business, and these projects are necessary for the business to grow, but he can't do them while he's at his main job. So this is how his schedule could look, and this is just an example of how it could look. Depending on the specifics, depending on what John wants to prioritize more in his life or take away, things can look different in real life. But this is just an example. Now, first of all, as you can see in this kind of pseudo daily plan, Everything is pretty much planned by the hour. If you have a planner, it's going to look a lot different, of course, because it's going to visually show each hour, and it's going to show the work being done each hour. But this is sort of, you can just in your mind picture what the planner will look like. So 6 a.m., John wakes up. He's got to get to work, but he wants to stay in shape. So from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., he works out. Now, one thing I want to point out too, and the reason why I like doing things by the hour is because, again, it forces you to actually move quickly. It forces you to have some urgency with your day. If we didn't set 1 hour time frames on each of these items, and I'm sure you've experienced this. I've experienced this too. This happens to me even to this day. Every once in a while, it happens to everyone. It's going to happen to you forever, no matter what. No one's perfect. You might wake up at 6 a.m. and if you don't have your workout schedule for 7 a.m., what you might do is you might sit there. You might take your time, get on your phone, check some Instagram, check some Facebook, check some Twitter, start a debate with people, get pissed off about the news, whatever. And then 6 a.m. turns into 7 a.m., turns into 8 a.m. And now it's 8:45 and you're about to be late for work because you kind of drifted off in a la-la land and you were sitting there on your phone consuming content when you should have been working out. Does that make sense? So this is why we block things off in sort of hour increments, because it really forces you to realize what the next thing that you need to do is. And again, going back to my earlier point, this is also the reason why you don't want to sort of plan the day of. If John woke up at 6 a.m. and then tried to plan his day out, first, he wouldn't be motivated. Two, he'd probably be in like a foggy headspace because he just woke up. He probably needs his coffee first. He's probably going to still check Instagram or social media or something like that and distract himself. He's not really going to be in the ideal headspace to really be strategic. So even if he does try to come up with a plan for the day, the next question is it an effective plan? And it probably isn't, because he's not in the right headspace to create an effective plan. So this is why we plan the day before. Now, getting back to his plan of the day, he finishes his workout at 8 a.m. and at 9 a.m. he's got to be at work. So from 8 a.m. until 9 a.m., this is his time to get prepared. He can get dressed, he can get showered, he can do whatever he wants, put his hair gel on, make his hair look all suave for the people at the office, get the perfect outfit so everyone's jealous of him and his swag. Then he gets in from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. As I mentioned, he's got a standard work day. Now, once he gets off work, he's going to take an hour or so to get home, sort of get himself prepared mentally. He's going to get himself sitting down at the computer. From 6 p.m. until 7:30, he's working on project 2 because it's the one that's due first. Let me go back real quick. Remember, project 2 is due in 4 days, so it's super urgent compared to the other two. Now, kind of keeping this trend in mind, he's going to work on project 2, and then once project 2 is finished, once he's finished with it, then he'll work on project 1, and then he'll work on project 3. And the key thing too in working on these projects is you don't want to wait till the very last minute to start them. You want to just be doing them once the previous project is knocked out. So if project 2 takes him a day, he's got 3 days extra to work on the next project. So now he's even further ahead of his schedule. Does that make sense? And if he does manage to knock out all 3 projects before they're due, the beauty of it is he can either replace those 3 projects with new projects that might further help him reach his goal, or depending on his headspace, depending on his energy levels, he can take a little bit of a break and not feel guilty about it because he's still working on his goals. He's still making progress toward his goals. So he's worked on project 2. He spent an hour and a half doing that. He crushed it. He's been focused. He studied. He acted effectively. So that hour and a half is not being wasted. He's not on social media. He's not distracted. He's hyper-focused. He's doing the work. He's getting done what needs to be done. Now 7:30 to 8:30 comes by, and he has earned the opportunity to relax. He's allowed to watch that TV show. He's allowed to watch Mad Men and just sit there, kick his feet up, put the TV on, and he's happy because he's actually done something that pushed him towards his goals. Now, once that all happens, he can watch a show, and from 9 p.m. until, say, 10 p.m. or 10:15, 10:30, whatever, he can chill with his friends. Maybe that's going out to a bar. Maybe that's having his friends come over and they just sit and chill, watch some TV. Whatever it is, he's free to do because he's done the things that will move him closer to his goal. He no longer feels the guilt. He's made progress, and now he has time for himself without feeling the overwhelm. Does that make sense? And then finally, he can be in bed at 10:30 or 11 or whatever. Everyone's got different bedtimes. Everyone requires different hours of sleep. But let's say in this case, he's in bed at 10:30, so he can wake up the next day at 6 a.m. and repeat the progress again, repeat the cycle again. And I've said this already, but as John completes his projects, he can move on to his next project based on the most urgent. And this is a system that allows him to always be moving towards his goals without creating that overwhelm and leading him towards burnout. Now, one of the key things you need to do is you also need to identify the correct priorities. What will make the needle forward should be your primary question that you're always asking yourself. What will move the needle forward? And this is kind of the hard part. If you set a goal, you really need to sit there and analyze what will make the goal be complete. What checklist will you have to complete in order to finish your goal, to get done whatever needs to be done? Once you've identified your goal, reverse engineer what it takes to accomplish it. And I've already used this example, but again, this is the whole gain 10 pounds, you need to eat more, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to get too deep into it because I've already kind of covered that, but I think you get the point. And then from there, once you've reverse engineered what needs to be done, you need to arrange those tasks in your planner, kind of like John did in the previous slide. Here's another example. You want to increase your income by $1,000 a month. Now, in this situation, you'd have to first figure out how you plan on increasing your income. Do you want to get a side hustle like DoorDash or Uber? Do you want to start your own side hustle, like start your own little business? Do you want to just work more hours, like just do overtime? Do you want to get a second job? There's lots of ways to kind of achieve that goal. You have to identify what you specifically want and then figure out how to do those things. So just kind of some random things I threw in for your goal of increasing your income by $1,000 a month. Buy a new course, learn a skill, sell a product or service, create a product or service, do cold outreach if you have your own business or you're trying to help someone else grow their business, whatever. There's a lot of things you can do. And again, if you were working with me one-on-one, we'd walk through this together and figure out what you should be doing based on whatever your goals are, whatever your ideal lifestyle would be, et cetera, et cetera. These are just examples. But the overall point is that you need to sort of identify your correct priorities. Now, I always tell my clients this, and I've sort of already mentioned this, but I want to get into something that I think is a bit easier for people to kind of comprehend and visualize. When you're prioritizing your tasks, there's what I call rocks. You have to organize your rocks. That's what I call it. You have big rocks, you have small rocks, you have pebbles, you have sand, and then you have water. Each of the size of the rocks correlates to how effective the task is and how close the task will kind of move you towards accomplishing the goal. Does that make sense? So for example, a big rock. You're focusing on the main thing that you can do to accomplish your goal. This kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier. A big rock is one of those things where if you do nothing else in a single day, that is the only thing you're doing. You're just doing that big rock. That is the most important thing. Then you have your small rocks. A small rock is something that it's still important, but it's not as important as the big rock. It's something that you can slightly procrastinate on. It's something that doesn't matter as much. You can do it after a big rock is done every single day. It doesn't mean that it's not important. It just means that it's not as important as the big rock. And then there's the pebbles and the sand. These are things that don't really require much effort, and these are things that don't matter that much. Things like checking your emails or maybe texting people or sending a non-urgent mail or reading mail that's not urgent. You can put these things off. They don't matter that much. I've seen people who will get an email and they respond to all the emails like as they come in. Or they're out sending emails to people once they think about sending the email. And in their mind, they're being efficient because they're being quick about sending it. Personally, I think that's ineffective. And the reason why is because the email they're sending out, first of all, if you always send out an email or read an email as it comes in or when you think about it, you're breaking your focus. 2, most of the time, the email you're sending, you don't need to send right now. You could probably put it off and just do all of the emails in just 10 minutes or 15 minutes all at once and save yourself a lot more time, save yourself a lot more headspace, save yourself a lot more focus for your other projects or tasks or your big rocks. It's not effective to just check emails and send emails just as they come up. You can do that all at once it's necessary, once the main things are done. And I say this because I've seen people who they'll do these little things, the pebbles in the sand. They'll work on these small things that don't matter that much and that really aren't contributing to their goals. Maybe it moves them like a centimeter or like an inch, but they're trying to move an inch when they should be trying to move a mile. Does that make sense? And so they're just moving in inches and they're not really getting anywhere because they're doing these things that don't really matter that much. Avoid doing that. Do the big rocks first, then the small, then the pebbles in the sand, and then finally is the water. The water goes on top. And the water is pretty much the social media scrolling, watching YouTube, Netflix, just chilling, kind of relaxing. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying it's not crucial. What I am saying is that it's the thing that should be done last. It's not the thing that should come first. Sort of what I mentioned earlier, John waking up. John might wake up, and you probably do this too. I do this at times too. We all do this. You wake up, and the first thing you do is you open your phone and you get on Netflix or Instagram, or not Netflix, Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, whatever, social media. You get the point. That's water. You shouldn't be doing the water first. You should be doing the big rocks first. And this whole idea of the big rocks, there's a book I read years ago, like a decade ago, that I got this from. I don't remember. Maybe it was Stephen Covey. That name comes to mind. I don't remember who it is, but I didn't come up with this concept of rocks. Someone else came up with this. And basically it's kind of an exercise of visualizing your tasks. And the idea is to picture that you have a jar, like a big glass jar. I'm trying to get myself in the camera. You have a big glass jar and your task is to fill it up. And you're supposed to fill it up with rocks, pebbles, sand, water, etc. All the stuff I mentioned. If you don't put each component in the correct order, you cannot complete the task. For example, if you put the water in first, then the sand, of course, the sand will absorb the water, so it'll harden up at the very bottom. Then if you try to put the big rocks in, you'll have no room at the top for the small rocks because the big rocks won't fit. You're closer to the smaller opening of the bottle, of the jar, I should say. If you try to put the small rocks first, and then you've created a hardened layer at the bottom, then you try to put in the water, then the big rocks, well, now the sand's going to overflow. You don't have enough room for the sand because once the sand touches the water, it's going to start to harden. It's not going to work. The only way for this to work is if you put the big rocks in first, then the small rocks so they can fit in between the big rocks. Then you put the sand and the pebbles above the small rocks so those seep in to the small rocks. And then you put the water so the water can seep down and then fill up the remainder of the jar. And that's sort of the idea of this, it's sort of the idea behind big rocks and small rocks. Do the most essential thing first, and then work your way up until the least essential thing needs to be done. Another thing I like to bring up, and I used to get coaching in the past. There's a guy out there, his name is Craig Ballantyne. I highly recommend looking at his content, reading his books. Super informative guy. Definitely changed my worldview on how to organize myself and be more productive. He sort of brought up, and I don't think he called it this, but it's effectively the exact same thing. He came up with this idea of the Eisenhower matrix. Again, I don't think he came up with that name. I don't think he even calls it that himself. But the concept is what he usually teaches. I learned it from him. And this on the right, this little chart on the right, this is the Eisenhower matrix. You need to figure out what's urgent and what's important. And then sort of tackle those things as they arise. There are some things that are both urgent and important. Those are the things you do first. There are some things that are important but not urgent. You can do those second, in the future. You don't have to do those now. You can do those in the future. There are some things that are not very important but urgent. And depending on how much they affect you, you can tackle it after the important stuff, or you can have someone else do it. Like if you have an assistant or a virtual assistant or a friend or a roommate or someone you can hire, whatever. It depends on what you're doing. You can delegate that or send it to someone else or do that later in the future. And then there's the things that are not urgent and are also not important. So scrolling through social media, wasting time, useless conversations. You can delete those things. You can omit those things. You can just not do those things at all. That's more of the way to handle tasks and priorities. Does that make sense? So I've already said this, but just to kind of reiterate, you need to create a plan. That's the point of the planner. It's to create a plan. It's to make you a general of your own life. A general has a good strategy, or he should have a good strategy when going to war. He's thinking about his enemy, how to defeat the enemy, and how to keep his own troops alive, how to achieve the goal. You are a general. You're a general with your own life. Your time is your troops. Put the big rocks first and tailor your planner to your schedule. So this is actually a pretty big thing. For example, if you have a 9 to 5, you might not be able to do your big rock first because your work life requires you to be at a certain place at a certain time and to do certain things. You have no choice. You can't work on your big rock. And maybe your 9 to 5 doesn't necessarily help you achieve the goal. It might keep you stable by giving you money, but it's not leading you to accomplish maybe your actual big goal for yourself. That's fine. You need to tailor your day so that way the very first thing you can do outside of things that are a priority that are fixed, like a 9 to 5, you have to tailor your day so that way your big rock still comes first. So for this example, this is a very basic example, but let's say you do have a 9 to 5, and let's say you're an entrepreneur trying to do cold outreach to get clients or to get leads. Let's say that's the main thing you need to do. That's the highest priority thing. What you should be doing is the very moment you leave work, or at least the very first thing you should be doing as a productivity task, once you leave work and kind of get yourself situated at home or Starbucks or wherever you're going to work, generate the leads, send the cold outreach, because that is your big rock. It's not the very first thing you're doing technically because you've been to work and maybe you worked out in the morning, which is also not super contributory, is that a word, to your goals. But just because of the timing that you have, you could get in a workout, but you might not be able to really sit there and take 2 or 3 hours to generate leads. Fair enough. But the very first thing you should be doing once you have the ability to do so is tackle the big rock. And in this case, the big rock might be generating leads. It can be whatever. It depends on your goals again. But you understand the point, hopefully. This is something else I want to bring up. And I kind of already said this in the previous example about the gym. But be mindful of tasks that are easy and fast to complete. I'll give you an example. And I actually kind of said this already. I like to go to the gym early in the morning, first thing in the morning. The reason why is because I've kind of created a habit of just going early, so it doesn't require much effort on my part to go. It's relatively fast. It takes me about maybe 45 minutes to an hour or so to work out in the morning. It contributes to a goal that I have, but not my primary goal. But the other key thing is it keeps the momentum going, or at least it starts me off with a lot of momentum, and it allows me to be more productive throughout the entire day. So for that reason, I like to do it first because it's easy to do. It's relatively quick. It doesn't require a lot of mental effort for me to work out. You're just moving your body. You're not really planning or strategizing or thinking about a bunch of stuff. So it's simpler for me to do first thing in the morning. It's actually harder for me to do a workout in the afternoon because it takes longer. There's more people at the gym. You have to physically drive there. It's just more difficult for me. And I kind of put that up here. It takes me about an hour and a half with no delay in between workouts. In the afternoon, it might take me an hour and a half to 2 hours. It takes much longer. And I also have much less energy because if I go in the afternoon, I've already worked earlier in the day. So my energy is a lot lower, physically and mentally. Excuse me. And I've said this before, but plan the day before. Do it before you go to bed. Personally, I think the last thing you should do before you go to bed, or one of the last things you should do, is set your planner and plan out your day. And I've already kind of gone over this whole last kind of bullet point about blocking out things that are the most important, but it's here just to kind of reiterate that point because it's so important. Now, these are the final things you need to do. And this is going to sound super basic, and it is basic, but most people will not follow this. You need to execute. Once you have something in your schedule, you need to actually do the thing that you put in your schedule. And that's the hardest part. The work will not get done for you. And I think the issue with this is people get motivated when they're planning things, but once they have to actually do something, that's when the motivation fades. And ultimately, what it comes down to, once you have to get the work done, is you just got to be disciplined. That's really all it comes down to. You have to be disciplined. You have to just get the work done. There's no real cheat or hack or anything like that. The best thing I can suggest is if you have a task to do, don't overthink it. Just start doing it. Start doing something. If you have to send out cold emails, don't try to plan the script. Don't try to plan the template. Don't try to find a bunch of leads. Just find an email and send it out. Send out something terrible if you have to. Just send out something. Just start working. Because as you begin working, that builds that momentum that I mentioned earlier. And then you'll start to kind of tweak things and you'll figure things out. And then you'll kind of get a little bit of internal motivation just to complete the task. But don't overthink it. Just start doing the work first. Now, my personal opinion, and this is what I do all the time. People get mad at me, but I think it's effective. Limit phone calls that are unnecessary. And I'm going to guarantee that 95% of your phone calls are unnecessary. You might think they're necessary. You might think they're important. They're probably not. Chances are they really are not important. I find that most of the time, the calls you probably get are spam calls, people trying to sell you stuff. Don't answer it, of course. Friends and family that might want to say hi, but they want to, it comes from a good place, but then they end up sucking out your time and you don't deny them because you don't want to seem like a dickhead or an asshole or you don't want to seem rude. Fair enough. And for those types of situations, I put my phone in airplane mode and I tell them I'll call you back at this time when it's most convenient for me. And if it doesn't work for them, I just say I'll text you. And that usually solves that problem. Then there's the third thing where there are phone calls where they're pretty important, kind of like they're productive phone calls. Those things I screen. Now, if someone says to me, I have to call you about this, about A, B, and C, I say, what is it? What do you call me about? If it's something that we can establish by text, we establish it by text. Because usually if it's something that you can establish by text, it takes like 2 or 3 texts to understand and get this idea across. Boom, done, took 5 minutes, you're good to go. If it's something that if they don't want to tell you what it is, I usually don't take those calls because chances are it's not that important. Again, it's just them bullshitting and it's them trying to make it seem urgent or important, but it's urgent or important for them, but not for you. And you need to prioritize yourself in this situation because time is your most valuable asset. I would just not take the call. I would tell them to text me or voice note me or something else, or I'll call them back when I'm free, when I've planned out to call them, and they can kind of go from there and figure out, how urgent or how important it is to them. And then the final thing, obviously, if it is super important or super urgent, if you have a relative that's like hurt or sick or someone really needs you right here and right now, obviously take it. But the key thing to take away is that most phone calls are not that important. Most phone calls just kind of drain time. They drain energy. They don't lead to you accomplishing your goal, and they're not conducive to productivity. They're not going to lead you to being productive. It's the opposite. Even taking a call where you think the person's just saying hi, it's not productive and it takes forever because people call and they're like, oh, I'm just calling to say hi. And then they try to do small talk and then you feel guilty. You don't want to kind of cut the call too short. So now you're on the phone for like an hour and you haven't really talked about anything important. And meanwhile, an hour has passed by and maybe you got off work and it's 7 p.m. You took the phone call and now it's 8 p.m. Now it's getting time for bed. You got to wake up early the next day. So you didn't actually get your big rock done. Do you see the point that I'm trying to make? So be mindful of phone calls. I think that's one of the biggest things that people waste time on. That and social media, both of those things should be removed for the most part. Like set aside a time to do those things, but don't fall into impulse or don't allow people to sort of dictate how you spend your time. If they call you, you don't have to answer. Let them call you back at a more reasonable time for both of you, or you call them back on your own free time or text or send a voice note, whatever. And again, this all requires discipline. Something else just to kind of keep in mind, track your important deadlines and dates. I try to keep track of everything important. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes I forget things. But in general, even things like when a bill is due or when my car needs to get fixed or when I want to get an eye exam or go to the dentist, whatever, anything that seems relatively important in your life or consistent, put it in your Google Calendar, put it in your calendar in your phone, put it in like your planner, put it somewhere where you can see it and where you'll be reminded of it. Keep track of all these important dates. even something that seems small, I've had plenty of times where something might seem small. Let's say, for example, like a bill. And this happened years ago. Nowadays, it's not super, it doesn't happen now. But in the past, if, say, I had a job and I wasn't getting paid that much, like I worked in retail and I wasn't getting paid that much, and I had a bill due, if I spent too much money before the bill was due, I wouldn't be able to pay for that bill. Does that make sense? So I'd kind of screw myself over. And then I get like a late fee, and then it would suck because you're spending more money just because you didn't plan out your finances effectively in the first place. And that's a small thing. It's kind of big. It could be big if it affects you a lot, but it's a small thing as far as like a date because it's usually pretty consistent. But any date that comes up, any deadline, keep track of it, put it in your calendar, put it in your planner. Yeah, like I said, when bills due in the past, sometimes money would get shifted from account to account. Sometimes I'd have to pay for things like my website and I would just forget. And then I would move money out of this account that my website was supposed to get that my website had an auto payment for, but there was no money because I moved the money. Just random stuff. Keep track of it. It helps you just stay organized, helps you not be stressed, helps you not scramble and mess up things. But yeah, I can't really emphasize that enough. And then the final thing too about this, outsource when possible. Um, Even if something doesn't take that long, in general, I'll outsource if there's a barrier to me getting it done. So I'll give you a quick example. I used to actively host a podcast called Meeting Virginia. I don't really host it much anymore just because I'm busy with a lot of other stuff. But when I first did Meeting Virginia, every episode was about an hour or so. And I would edit my own videos. And I don't like editing Meeting Virginia episodes because it's so tedious to just sit there and switch the camera. It's hard to describe if you're not familiar with video editing or the software I use. But pretty much I had two cameras set up and they're both recording simultaneously. And when I would go to edit, I would delete the footage based on who was not talking. So if I was speaking, I'm editing in the video just my camera, and I'm deleting my guest's footage for that segment while I'm talking. Then when he or she's talking, I'm deleting my footage of me just sitting there, and I'm only showing the footage of them talking. And doing all that's just super tedious, especially if the episode's like an hour. It would take me like 4 hours to edit one video. But it was really more than that because I would dread doing it so much. It would really take me like 1 to 3 hours to even start editing. Then it would take an additional 3 to 4 hours to actually do the editing to get it done. And then that doesn't factor into like sometimes my computer would just go slow, or sometimes I would make a mistake and delete stuff. Just a big hassle. So keep that in mind. If you can outsource stuff, do it. Especially if it's a big rock and you just struggle doing the big rock, outsource the big rock so you can do something else instead. That's also productive. That is, to me, something that I don't see a lot of people do, but more people should do. Real quick, before I talk about this, I remember years ago, I was at this real estate conference, and there's a lot of real estate agents that made like 6 figures or more. And it stunned me how few of them outsourced anything. It stunned me tremendously. I remember the guy was saying how you can do a tax write-off. Even if you have like a kid, you can pay your son or your daughter like $15,000 or $12,000 a year and then write it off your taxes because you have them as an employee, just kind of side stuff. And it stunned me how few people, because to me that I had known that already at that point. I'd already known that. And it stunned me how few people knew that. And they were like, oh, well, why would you have your kids? What can your kids possibly do in your real estate business? And I was like, your kids can do a lot. They can send out, if you have a bunch of postcards you want to send out, you can hire your own son to just sit there and put stamps on the postcards. You know how tedious that is to put stamps on envelopes, write names in envelopes, just stuff the envelope. It's tedious. Have them do it, pay them, and then write it off. It's a win-win all around. If you have a young child who's like 13 or 14, they can go take door hangers, put them on different doors. That's marketing for your business. It stuns me how few people would do things like that. They wouldn't outsource. I saw agents who were making like good money just walking around to different neighborhoods, putting flyers for 3 hours a day on doors. It's like, why are you doing that? Your time is worth like $100 an hour. You're literally wasting money by doing this. Hire some random kid for like $10 an hour. Save yourself $90. You do something else that'll make you more money. And then have the kid do all the other stuff that's still going to make you money anyway. But he or she's doing it at less of a cost to you. Doesn't make any sense. So outsource whenever possible. It makes the most sense. You should be thinking about your time as if it's money. I alluded to this earlier, but I like to think of time with this method called the salary method. Think about your salary or your hourly pay. This is the lowest value of your time because time is worth more than whatever your employer pays. And then you need to sit there and ask yourself if an hour's pay is worth the activity you're doing. For example, if you're like that agent I just mentioned that makes $100 an hour and you slack off and you don't want to do any work for your business and you've decided to not do that, and instead what you're doing is you're watching Netflix with your friends for 3 hours a day. It's totally fine. The question you need to ask yourself is it worth $300 of potential income to sit there, really more, but at least 300 of potential income to watch Netflix with friends? If you're willing to pay $300 to watch Netflix, then keep watching Netflix. If you're not willing to pay it, stop watching Netflix, or at least find some other way to make money while you're watching Netflix. Does that make sense? In this salary method idea, I'm going to run through quickly because I want that to be its own separate video. I think that's something that I want to kind of get deeper into. But to me, this is just sort of a mindset to consider kind of when thinking about money and time, kind of relating the two of them so they both make sense together. So let's take mediocre Mike. He makes $17 an hour. He works $8 a day. His daily income, kind of just doing the quick calculation, 17 times 8, is $136 a day that he makes from his job. He likes Netflix and video games. Is it worth it for him to spend time doing those things? If he, say, plays video games for 2 hours, it costs him $34 to play video games. Is it worth it? It depends. There's no actual answer. It just depends on the individual. It depends on what they like. Some people might say the video games gives me peace of mind. It de-stresses me. So it is worth $34. I would gladly pay that if it meant not being stressed. Maybe work stresses him out. Depends. And that's totally fine. Then we have Successful Sam. Successful Sam makes $150,000 per year. He works 12 hours a day on average. He has a salary and he can be called to work anytime. His job requires effort outside of standard office hours. So even though he's not doing a standard 9-to-5 job, he's just working in general. Whenever the job needs him, he is there for it. And maybe he does work that also requires him to be thinking about work at all times of the day. His daily income is $410, which kind of makes his hourly income $34. And I'm sort of taking basically his 12 hours a day that he works, but I'm also kind of factoring in him thinking about work outside of him kind of being present at work, if that makes sense. Like if he works at, say, a law firm, he's an attorney, he might be at the law firm for 12 hours a day, but he's probably still thinking about the case outside of those office hours. Hopefully that makes sense. He likes to drink in his free time. Is it worth it? It depends. Because you have to consider too, he's missing out. Let's say he drinks for 2 hours. He might, or let's say 3, I have 3 on here. He makes $34 an hour. Say he wants to drink for 3 hours. It costs him $34 times 3 just to want to not be working. Then he's also paying for the drinks. So it really costs him more. Let's say in this situation, it's costing him about $100 for 3 hours of drinking. Let's just say it'd be more than that, but let's just say it costs him about $100. Is it worth it for Sam to go out drinking 3 hours a day? Maybe for him, $100 to spend on drinks is not that much. Maybe he's fine with that. Depends. It depends. And there's no right or wrong answer to this. This is just meant to be a way for you to kind of get an idea of how you should be using and managing and budgeting your time. Hopefully this all makes sense. If it doesn't too, by the way, leave a comment or shoot me a DM on Instagram at Leviticus Rich, and I'll kind of help clarify this and help this make more sense. Then the final things, adjust as needed. When you first start trying to implement this strategy, you're not going to get everything. It's going to actually be a bit stressful. When I first started this, it actually kind of hurts the brain because you're trying to change the way you think and you're trying to change the way you kind of tackle life. it's going to be a barrier. Your brain's going to put up a barrier. It's not going to want you to do this because your brain likes to keep things consistent. It likes familiarity. So once you try to break from the familiarity and try something brand new, especially something like this that affects your entire day, your brain's going to push back on it. Don't allow yourself to talk yourself out of doing this. Do this. It is fundamental and essential, in my personal opinion, to achieving any kind of, at least even like little success. And I genuinely think doing this one thing, using the planner, will truly make your life far more effective. You'll get so much more done by doing this. Like I said, this is a bit of a muscle to develop. You're not going to just jump in, and even if you understand this conceptually, you're not just going to jump in and get it right away. It's going to take some timing. It's going to take some effort. It's going to take some reps and sets in the tank, so to speak. Just keep at it. Don't talk yourself out of it. And then review the planner at the end of every day or every week to figure out what you did well and what you could improve on. Because you might get to the end of the week, look at the planner and realize that you didn't do anything you meant to do. And if that's the case, you need to go back and figure out why. What did you waste time on? What held you back? What didn't go right? You need to figure out where you're messing up, and then so that way you can correct it. And then the final thing too, don't stress yourself out too much, but don't be dishonest with yourself. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. It sounds simple, but it's not. It's simple conceptually, but it's not simple practically. It will require some effort, but just stick in there. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't stress yourself out if you don't do everything you're supposed to in a day. Don't be upset if you wake up late. Don't be upset if you go to bed late. Just take some time, breathe a little bit, reorient yourself, and figure out what you did wrong so that way you can fix it. But you have to be honest with yourself in order for that last step to happen. In order for you to adjust things and change things and figure out what went wrong, you need to be honest with yourself. And then kind of reiterating some earlier things, I think it's super important. Avoid useless conversations. They will waste a lot of your time and they'll prevent you from being productive and getting stuff done. Avoid hanging out with random people within reason. If you're going out on the weekend for fun or just trying to have a good time, cool, that's fine. Do it. Everyone needs to have fun. Everyone needs to be around friends and socialize. I'm not saying be a workaholic. I'm not saying be Gary Vee and grind all day. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's effective. I think you can work a little bit and get a lot, but don't just hang out for the sake of hanging out when it comes up, because it will happen where people are just going to ask you to hang out when you want to be productive. Be willing to say no. Be willing to say no. And then avoid letting idleness linger. Don't just sit around doing nothing. Be productive. Have a goal. Be constantly trying to tackle the goal and trying to be productive. Then the final thing, and this is totally free. This is not like a call to action to sell you any shit or whatever. I do have coaching. If you want to do one-on-one coaching with me, that's totally fine. It is expensive. I'm throwing that out here right now. It is expensive. So I imagine that most people watching this are not going to take me up on it, which is totally cool. I'm not going to like hard sell you into it. If you are curious about it, shoot me. It might be below in the description somewhere, or send me a DM on Instagram and I'll tell you more about it. But what you should do, and this is also going to be in the description, this planner right here, I made a custom planner that I think will help people more effectively utilize their day. It has the basic stuff that you would see in a planner, but it also has sort of exercises to help you reflect on what went well and what went wrong. And you can kind of keep track of things like your mood, when you woke up, top priorities, how to reverse engineer certain steps. I think it's pretty valuable. It's totally free. Just click the link below and you'll find it. Yeah, just put in your email and you'll get it super free. And then the last thing too that you can do, I mentioned I have one-on-one coaching, which is expensive, but I also have group coaching in the roundtable. So you're free to use that if you want. There's a link to that below. Go check that out. At the time of creating this video, the coaching is free for life for the first 20 people to sign up. So no matter what price it ever goes to, you will always get it for free if you sign up using the link below. And if you're one of the first 20 people, so who knows if that 20 is up by the time you watch this. But did want to throw that out there. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you got a lot out of it. If you did, click the like button, leave a comment, let me know what you thought about it. And I will see you in the next video. Peace out.